This is The Blockchain Show.
The Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies and promotes widespread adoption of cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology. This is episode number 40 with Stephen Walker from Wouldwork. Are you looking for an easy way to buy Bitcoin or Ether on a safe, secure platform? Coinbase is the easiest place to buy and sell digital currencies. Sign up today as a friend of The Blockchain Show, and if you buy or sell $100 of Bitcoin or more, you'll earn $10 of free Bitcoin for yourself and $10 of Bitcoin to support this show. Join now using the link in this episode's show notes at theblockchainshow.com. Ledger Wallet is a smart card-based Bitcoin hardware wallet bringing maximum protection level to your Bitcoins without sacrificing usability or control. Find the link in this episode's show notes.
My name is Stephen Walker. I'm a managing partner at Wouldwork. That's WOULD, woodwork.com. So a little bit about my background. I am a classically trained designer, so come from like the printmaking, graphic design world. Soon got into more technical design. Background is largely in community-powered platforms. So the first one being Groupon, that is now known as a coupon company, but in the early days it was it leveraged the collective purchasing power of communities. I was the first designer over there. I joined when there was about 20 people, and then we grew it. By the time I left, about 4 years later, there was nearly 13,000. We had taken it public. From there, I went on to a company in New York to work on a platform that used community-driven product development. So we actually manufactured physical products, but built by community. And there was an interesting part of that where the equity was distributed among everyone that was part of the product development process. Throughout my history of those two places, I had been building teams and building product. So when I left that place, I moved on to start Wouldwork. Wouldwork is basically a network of exceptionally talented software engineers and product designers with the aim of building products that increase the quality of life. It is, all the designers are technical and they can code, and all the engineers are very product centric and design oriented. So that's basically what Wouldwork is we're trying to continue to build this network and think that, products are better built when they're done by a community of individuals as opposed to just individual companies. Specifically, we start with the focus is always on the team, because if you look behind any great product, you'll find an amazing team. What we do is we focus on building a team for specific products, and then sort of the product, you'll see that it kind of falls into place. In order to build the teams, we start with the relationship. So everything at Wouldwork starts with building the network based on relationships.
It's always one of those things that I kind of wonder if there needs to be a shift with the way we hire. We hire people a lot of times in companies, so you interview by yourself. But I think maybe that should switch to be like hiring teams. There's a group of teams that have some skill or unique talents that have worked together. And I know that there's companies that once they find a good team, they're perfectly content letting them sit and chill if they don't have a project that moment for them for a little while. Right. But I've never heard of a company hiring like a team.
Well, I mean, there's acqui-hires, right?
Right.
Or, and those are pretty prominent, especially when you find the right team. I mean, there are teams out there that I know that literally just got together in order to be acquired, right? That's just because they know the level of the talent. And, the idea of Wouldwork actually came partly from that. As we were building, internally at these companies, building these teams, it's really difficult. And like, honestly, nothing against recruiters, but like the process is largely busted in our opinion, right? Like recruiters are incentivized to put asses in chairs, right? And they're not necessarily like understanding what the value of that person can bring. The better ones understand better, but what we've found is in order to, find this exceptional talent, you need to be that exceptional talent. So like a recruiter can never go out and talk to the product designers at the level of, the people I'm talking about. You just wouldn't be able to speak the same language. But when another product designer reaches out to another product designer, it's just a natural flowing conversation, whether that ends with an actual, you working together or not. So what we've always done is you actually use the network to do the, quote unquote recruiting, because it's the most effective, as opposed to having someone have a title of recruiter. So that's a big part. That was sort of the impetus of Wouldwork, is that, all of these companies are looking for the great teams to build a big product, but building a great team is about building great relationships. And you start by doing that by like some kind of like, common thread between the two people talking about building something, not like a job of placing. So, the recruiting part was what we found was oftentimes broken. And so, we kind of were like, okay, well, let's build a team as opposed to just figuring out how to get people together to build a product. Because you find, if you look at, like I said, you look behind any great product, you'll find a great team. That's one part of it, is like Wouldwork. We actually hope to leave behind a team if we work on, a project for you or with you. The other part is, we see a lot of these agencies out here, right? Design and development agencies that model is kind of broken too, in our opinion, because what you have is these agencies, their entire margin is based off of an hour worked. So what they try to do is they try to find clients to bill as much as possible, which drives up the cost of this work. And then you try to find the people to do it as cheap as possible, which drives down the quality of the work. Mm-hmm. So with those two things is sort of like how we're starting to kind of form this Wouldwork network in order to create products, whether that be internally, we build products internally, or externally for the, selected partners.
Maybe to take a step back a little bit, you worked at Groupon, and then for the company after that, you had team or company. It was product development that was done. Tell me a little bit more about that. Yeah.
So what we did is we had a platform, which that's the part I led. There was there's a bunch of different departments. That was like industrial designers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, all these people. But the platform was kind of like the engine of it, right? So what people would do is they'd come on, they'd submit product ideas or just like invention ideas. Basically, it was an invention platform, is what we called it. Mm-hmm. So people would submit ideas, and at each step of the product development process, you could acquire equity, right? So like if you submitted the idea, you could potentially get 3% if the product actually made it to market when it went and got sold. This company's no longer, well, the first version is no longer around. Its fate was sealed. It ran out of money basically. Because it turns out, physical products are really expensive and the margins are really thin. And when you give away percentages of, that take, it becomes, it's an expensive business. It's too bad. I think it could probably work nowadays with some of the blockchain technology coming out here and like even distribution of equity. But, we can keep talking about that.
It seems like your three projects that you've mentioned all have some sort of component of self-organization organisms. So organizations. So, Groupon, the buyers, self-organize together to purchase something, or at least initially. I mean, I still use Groupon. I don't know too many people who still do, but
yeah,
I still use it.
Well, I mean, in the early days, it was a fascinating thing to watch, right? Like the original idea came from like I think it was like the CEO, Andrew Mason, was saying, hey, like the cell phone companies are screwing with us. We could, if we collectively do, take some action on them, they can't, like collectively we can have more power. And then that turned into like, sort of like what kind of discount or kind of reduced rate can you get if you all say we're going to buy something, right? So like, I don't know if you remember, there was a tipping point, right? Mm-hmm. So, you could go to a local business and say, hey, what volume do you need in order to give your product for 50% off? And they'd be like, well, we need, 2,000 of these items sold. We'd be like, okay, well, there it is. If 2,000 people don't buy, it's a wash. If 2,000 people do, those 2,000 people will be in your door, which is an amazing marketing for local, businesses. And, you make your margin via volume, and all these people get 50% off. It was truly a win-win-win.
Yeah. How does Wouldwork, like, how are these teams organized? There's no recruiter, so these teams go out and they find the new talent to join the team, or? Yeah.
So basically, it's like it kind of begets itself, right? As we start to, we add these, some talented individual. It's almost in every case they start working a little bit and they work on some really amazing projects, or they're able to work on their own stuff, and then they're like, hey, they go back to like maybe they have a full-time job, or maybe they have friends in the industry and they're like, yo, you should check this out. It's awesome. And then they're like, hey, are you guys looking for more people? And we're always like, yeah, of course we're looking to, meet more interesting people that potentially could, work on amazing products and output amazing stuff. So it's kind of grown naturally, which is why we don't do a lot of marketing around it. We don't plan to measure the success of the network by the amount of people in it. So we have our metrics are actually based on the goals of the people in the network. So right now, and this kind of gets into where we're talking about, implementing some blockchain technologies, mm-hmm. For specifically voting, who can get into the network, right? So consensus around, and that's kind of like our hiring process. It's instead of a couple people, which would be at a normal company, would be like the managers saying yes or no, or I'm going to hire this person whether you like it or not. You can build consensus that's guaranteed, not sort of some subjective sort of manager's opinion on something. So naturally sort of growing the network based on, consensus of the network and being able to control that in a systematic way through using, technology. But yeah, so it's right now it's been growing pretty naturally at a good clip, and we're happy with that, honestly.
So do you have the blockchain aspect of it set up right now where people are voting on new team members?
No. So the way we approach all this stuff is we do things manually until they're painful. So right now is we kind of have these models of how we introduce new people into the into the network. We have these set up and kind of documented, and we all kind of trust each other because the network is small enough right now that we can, guarantee checks and balances. But as it scales, outward, or maybe someone that wants to be in the network that we've never met, or have no context of, or don't really know anything about, or in a different country, we want to start to put in these toolings that can enable us to sort of make objective decisions without, with knowing that they'll be objective. And so we can leverage technology in that regard, we think.
What's an example of a metric that somebody is using in your company in Wouldwork?
So one of them is, you mean like a metric for how we hire, or like a metric for success of Wouldwork, the network?
Yeah, I'm sorry. The success. So you had mentioned that other companies use, success metrics based off of how many people, or success metrics based off of,
So right now we have a few goals that a few of the core members have set. One of them is to be able to work from anywhere and it not impact the work whatsoever. So free, like independence of geographic, locations. Another one is to be able to spend as much time as you want with your family and or pets, the ones you love.
Yeah.
So these are I know they sound a little like airy-fairy, but like these are actually objective things that we can hit and say like, are we able to do this, right? Like, and so these are the kind of goals where we're like, okay, well, another one is financial freedom. So and that differs for each person, but we can absolutely measure that, right? We can say like, without sharing the financials of your personal situation, are you hitting this, would you say? And they can either say yes or no. Like we can actually, we can wrap harder metrics around that if we choose, but basing it on kind of like livelihood and how you prefer to live is a much more effective way to work than to say like, oh, we need to scale it up for this amount. And, so we're making this amount of money and because you kind of forget about the people in the network once you start doing that. That's not to say we don't have all sorts of financial forecasting documentation. Right. But the goals are sort of like our guiding light and kind of, help us remind ourselves that like, maybe we should not be scaling so fast or, like it's getting out of hand. I'm working more than I had planned to. So.
There's a number of studies, and one of them that I'm thinking of has to do with, they gave, smart people a problem to deal with, and in one, they didn't pay them, and in the second one, they paid them. And at a certain point of difficulty of problem, the monetary reward, like making that the focus, actually decreases the person's or team's ability to solve a difficult problem. Mm-hmm. The more mundane tasks, they get done better and faster the more money you give. But the more difficult, the more challenging task, actually it's a discouragement to have that be the focus. I always found that to be an interesting study.
I think the solutions to these harder problems are not about money, right? Like they're like personal goals in life. Like being successful is not, measured by financials solely by the people that I've met and I respect. Right? Like they actually like building amazing things. Maybe it's because they know that like financial freedom comes with that, or they know their worth, but solving the problem is bigger than just like the paycheck at the end of the solution. Right. At least what we've found. I don't work with people that tend to be like, well, I don't care about the work I'm doing. I get paid a lot. That's not something I hear a lot. At least for the personalities that I've always respected through the years. How
else are you utilizing blockchain at Wouldwork, or what are the plans besides kind of voting on different consensus?
So the thing we're working through now is actually the idea of sort of what we're calling a work currency. One of the the idea is that if you are part of the network, you are incentivized to use the other people in the network to get your idea built. So this is actually like one of the main reasons we started this was all of the talent in this network and a lot of the greatest talent out there. They have amazing ideas, but like they struggle to find the time or, the money to work on these, right? As of now, you have to go like quit your job, save up your money and, go build your startup idea and hope you're successful. It's a lot harder to do that when you have, a family that depends on you, bringing in money. So anyway, one of the ideas is that, you can use this network, if you're inside this network, to have other people in the network help you build your idea. So instead of paying them, you can build up a work currency essentially. So like say you do a little work for them, you can then have, some kind of representation of value of theirs to use later. So that all boats rise with this tide sort of. So the way we're thinking about it is potentially some currency or coin that you could then build and transfer within the network only. Or, and eventually maybe someone outside can purchase it or it can only be used if you want Woodwork to do work or someone in the network to do work for you. You can only use this coin, which then would, potentially drive up the value. One of the main reasons is because we don't we want the transfer of value to not lose any value, right? So like when you use $1 to pay someone, you get taxed on it. There's fees, the transferring of that. So we think that if we could transfer that value, sort of like this work currency, in a more efficient way where, it's not taxed or, and it's all recorded and there's a ledger to make sure that exactly, how much you've accrued or how much someone else has spent, that there's something super interesting there.
You have a very geographically dispersed team or no?
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of us in New York, Pennsylvania, Costa Rica, San Francisco, Minneapolis, and it keeps growing. So we work on the internet. It's distributed. So the internet original design is decentralized. So we just don't think that it should make sense or it should matter where people are physically located.
Yeah, I think some sort of work currency for these geographically dispersed teams will probably be beneficial, just because if you wanted to hire somebody to have an in-kind currency, I don't know if in-kind is the correct term, but to be using something that everybody within the network accepts, makes it super, super simple.
Yeah, I mean, and it makes it easier to transfer that to your local currency as well, right? Like you can, as long as there's a way to fashion that, but the transfer of it is what we're really concerned about, and making that more efficient. The idea, there's a lot of conversation about how closed to make it, especially with these, the current ICO market. You see,
right.
Which is we could come up with this work currency. You can only get these people in the network because the people in the network are highly sought after, right? Like in a way that they're highly recruited. So we're like, okay, you can sell this coin outside, and then people can buy the coin, which would potentially drive up the cost, right, or the price of it, or the value of it, and then if you are in the network, you are working for this coin, so there's naturally a driving up of the price, the value of this coin. So as you just working in the network, you're actually the value of the work that you did in the past is going up. So there's those ideas, but it seems something that if you did too fast without thinking about it, it could be highly disruptive to the path of the network in general. The quality of work might shift from, you wanting to create a great product to you just wanting to get the coin. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So again, there's sort of we kind of do it to a manual degree until it's painful or it's just such an obvious choice. To do that, to automate it or to replace it with some kind of technology. But it's super interesting. I mean, these ICOs are they're tempting for any business that needs a cash influx.
Yeah, there's a lot of backlash right now against them. But I don't see it stopping the ICOs from raising ridiculous amounts of money. I think it's tough for me to exactly say because the landscape has changed so much. You used to have to do a seed and then go through the series in different rounds. And, you got the same amount of money, but it was over a long period of time. And it consumed so much of your resources to get these fundings. And now it's you get everything in one go. It's 140 million, sure, here you go. Does your product work? Who knows? I'm skeptical that Bancor can work.
Yeah. I think the thing that a lot of people are maybe not missing, but the difference is that, when you take these big rounds when you're a private company, you're taking a lot of money from a few people, right? Which drives up, the risk for these people that are investing, $1 million, $10 million, whatever, tens of millions of dollars into your company. When you do an ICO, they're like, okay, well, I'm just going to buy a coin so I can have some skin in the game. It just so happens that 1 million people want to buy it. You know what I mean? So it's not like so the risk for the individual investing is a lot lower, so they're willing to just do it along with, hundreds of thousands or millions of other people, as opposed to I need to go get $1 million and, hopefully this one individual is going to give it to me. So like the idea of where the money's coming from has an impact on how much is being raised, because like the risk is distributed among everyone that gave, the $5. It's like the accredited investor part, kind of goes away, which is nice because there's a lot of people that have domain expertise that just want to, have a little skin in the game.
Yeah, I think the accredited investor type stuff is one of the most ridiculous laws I've ever heard. Oh, I'm sorry. You don't make enough money to take any sort of risk, but buy lotto tickets. Go to Vegas. It's so stupid.
Well, you know where it came from, right?
No.
It was like the snake. It's basically like the snake oil salesman, right? So what they would do, like before this existed, was like you could go around and you could just go raise like, hey, I got this great idea. There's tons of other people in it. All we need is $500. You go do that to a bunch of schmoes like that don't know any better, and then all of a sudden you just, as soon as you've collected a bunch of money, you go, oh, the business failed. Sorry, your money's gone. So it was actually put in place to protect all these normal people. It's like, well, if you don't have the funds to be able to invest, then you shouldn't be investing. And that's the idea. I'm not saying it's right by any means. But it's built to protect people that don't know any better. It's like, well, maybe they should lose their money. So what some people would say.
Yeah, I think about it, and I get the intent. I just don't know whether it actually does what it's intended to do. I mean, it's archaic for sure. It's old. I think it's from like the 20s or 30s, maybe even earlier. I don't know. It seems like those are the really juicy investments, the one you want to get in. You want to be able to see if you can, pick the sector, pick the company that's really poised to go from, 0 to 60 in 2 seconds or whatever, to pick these really good companies that are out there. And the old school VCs don't really have any more knowledge. I mean, I think now they just say it's kind of just like throwing darts. You just buy as many, parts of different companies as you can, because you really no way to tell the difference between, after you do some due diligence to make sure it's not a total fraud, there's no way to tell one company from the next of how it's going to perform.
You're right. I mean, these larger VCs, like that whole community it's incestuous, right? Like they all kind of like, they get the deal flow, no one else gets in, and they like in some cases they'll just like hear about one coming down, the other people are in it, so that you have access to that. They're operating on a different level, and it's virtually impossible for someone like you or me to get in on even if we think the company is amazing. And we had the money, we'd still be, locked out because you don't know the right people. So like, I'm kind of bullish on the whole idea of an ICO, and I don't, as far as if you want to raise 140 million, by all means, I don't think that will actually have a positive effect on like the goals, just because I know that amount of money can do to a team of like, let's say 3 people that don't even have a product yet. I don't, you know what I mean? Like that's what I would be more worried about is internally, whether you kind of lose focus on the goal, but
there's like First Blood, they raised, I don't know, $7 million or somewhere around that, but it was when Ethereum was like $7 or something, and now, so they raised $7 million, and that, they 40x that. I don't know what their war chest is, but it's like when you have that much money, there's no reason to fail, for one, but two, there's like no motivation to do anything. You're already like a billionaire almost.
Yeah, wouldn't you just be like, what a better idea might be, and it might be easier? Let's just pull it out and put it in an investment. let's take half of it and put it in, some investment that like is going to have a higher return, and that way, if we ever need it, it's over there accruing cash. We never need to pay anyone back or say, you know what I mean? And then we'll just take the other 40 million that we have and actually build the product that we,
Yeah.
You become all of a sudden you become a financial company just because it's a better idea and it's safer. I mean, you saw Ethereum is just like what dropped like a big amount.
Yeah.
I don't know what the exact percentage is,
even
but
back
it went
up.
from,
Have you checked today?
I have not.
Oh,
I try not to actually.
Yeah.
It's a practice of mine.
There was a huge drop crypto wide, but Ethereum went all the way down to like 210.
Oh yeah. I saw that for the it was basically just like a lot of people taking money off the table at once, and then they have all that the margin calls and the stop gaps, right? It says like if it drops below this, sell, and it just crushed it. What was that? Where'd that happen on? I don't remember exactly.
Yeah, there was a flash crash on GDAX, and people were buying.
Yeah, GDAX, that's right.
Yeah, people were buying Ethereum for 10 cents.
Good luck. That was awesome.
Yeah, but now it's back up to 300, so I don't know what's going on.
And then there was the founder. I can never pronounce his name. Vitalik.
Yeah.
He there was some talk of somebody basically like tweeted that he died in a car accident and the price dropped substantially. And then he proved that he wasn't dead by holding up a piece of paper with a recent transaction.
Yep.
And
proof of life. Proof
of life. It was. I like his shitty ass handwriting.
Are you building blockchain stuff at Wouldwork too, or just using it internally?
So we're building. So we do a couple things. We build products for outside partners. So some people call them clients. We like to call them partners, just because we actually partner a lot closer with an agency who would call them a client. So we're building a few super interesting things actually. With the kind of the enterprise IoT space, we're building something else that has, basically shipping analytics with sensors, and so there's a bit of touch of the physical world there. All of these companies that we're working with have like a clear, blockchain ability, sort of. They haven't yet. And then we also are building some tools internally. One of them has to do with just like relationship management, because that's a tool building for ourselves. But we're also building something related to the blockchain internally that is not related to Wouldwork. And then obviously the stuff that is related to the network. And we also are wanting to build, if somebody has an idea for something that they want to implement on the blockchain, we want to partner potentially with them and help them build that idea. So we're sort of like, we operate as like, we will sort of like an agency, but we don't call ourselves an agency. But then we also build, products internally.
So you're looking for talent, new team members. You're also looking for ideas to come in, and then your team will work on it in exchange for either equity or for these internal currencies in Wouldwork?
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, right now you would work with Wouldwork and you would just get paid to do that.
Oh,
so
okay.
the next step is, potentially this currency. Again, we don't want to just jump into this whole idea of like, oh, we'll create a currency and then we'll do it. We think it's a little preemptive to start to do that.
You actually used the word disruptive in a way that I haven't heard used in like a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a bad way, in a negative term.
Yeah, exactly. It's, imagine that, right? Well, we don't have a pitch deck. So that's one thing. We've also been profitable from the very start, which is probably where a lot of these decisions come from. We don't need to do an ICO. We all are paid for the work we do, and the company's growing, and so we pride ourselves in that, and also it helps us keep a clarity of decision making. But yeah, so people in the network, you can come join the network. Obviously, there's a selection process, and you can work on any or all of the projects that we're currently working on. We're always looking to grow the network, because as we grow the network, it turns out that more people want to work with us because they either want access to a specific individual, or they just want a guaranteed great product. So that's kind of where the agency part comes in. If you're in the network, you can basically, because the way we manage all of the projects across it, that we can scale up and down for each product or project. So the idea is like one partner says like they want to do a certain amount of spend a month. We can accommodate that based on the network being, malleable and fluctuating all the time.
What's the supply chain partner doing? What are the applications that you guys are doing for them?
So I'm not sure I can talk about the name, but I can describe some of the product stuff. So what they do is they have a sensor that they put in with all of the products. Like say, so this isn't. It is not yet.
Okay.
You just had that company on. Forgive me for not remembering.
Chronicled,
yes. Yeah. So they're kind of doing it in like the physical products. So like, authenticity. This is more of when you're shipping perishable goods potentially. Mm-hmm. So let's say, food is obviously one, flowers and stuff is another one, but there's vaccines that are really important to keep monitored and all that stuff. So these sensors are not in these large containers, but they're actually on the specific item. Okay. So, you could imagine, 100 of these in a container, because part of the container has a different temperature and humidity. And then so all of these sensors kind of go in with the product obviously based on whatever kind of product it is and what kind of monitoring you need. And then on each end, that data is pulled via basically a checking in and out of the device. I don't want to go too far into the technology because they're still a little stealth and they're raising money right now. But we're building sort of like the dashboard for the analytics of this product, and then also the technology that will checking in and out of these sensors.
Yeah, I mean, I could envision something along those lines where you have thousands or hundreds of products in a container. They all have a sensor on them. They're all like RFID chip or something, and you check it out, and that gets put on the blockchain. So now you have confirmation that say it was a chocolate bar, right? The chocolate bar didn't get above 100 degrees, or in that case it melted and its product isn't as good. Or if it was a vaccine, that it stayed within the certain range that keeps it alive, 72 to 78 degrees or something like that. And then you have this like inalterable record of the temperature of the vaccine from start to finish. And that's like amazing. It's just like well, the
important part is like you realize like it took off and it was 72 degrees, and then you showed up and it was 72 degrees, but like there's no recollection of the middle, right? Of like, oh, it went up to 90 and everything died in it. And they're like, it's like beer, right? It's like it cold when it was made, and then all of a sudden it got too hot, and then all of a sudden you grab it out of the cooler. You're like, oh, it's cold. You just assume it's always been cold, but if it gets too warm, you open it up, and we all know what that tastes like. So it's the same idea. It's like if you could put that on the blockchain and have immutable, like a ledger of that information, you could then you could see all sorts of impacts in insurance, just in general, like being able to lower insurance costs potentially. There's an impact on actually just like the logistics of shipping that stuff. So like I imagine this company, down the road could become just a shipping company where you go, well, you don't have to have a contract with this shipping company. What you can do is you can just come to us. We have relationships with all the shipping companies. It's more important that your product gets there, at temperature than at speed, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take it the long way around, but it's going to be cheaper, and we're going to make sure that it stays. So that's just a simple example. So like I just think it's a obvious use case for the blockchain. I think they're definitely thinking that direction. I haven't seen a lot of products or platforms that I don't think could have some kind of usage on the blockchain, which is why it's so exciting to me.
Yeah. definitely is a space that is going to affect, almost everything. Some more so than others.
Yeah, I mean, originally when I, first heard about it and I started looking into it, like the first and obvious one was sort of like voting, like, oh, finally we could have, a democracy, but like it's a true democracy of, one person, one vote. But then, I think other people, people have quickly moved away from that. And it seems, I mean, I'm sure there's some people doing it, but now they're like, okay, well, let's create other companies. That one seems too difficult, which is, I'm not sure whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but
I like the voting one. I think that, our current system is it's incredibly outdated. In the past, if you were a farmer, all your neighbors were farmers. You were basically not every of them, but most of them were farmers, and you would send Joe the farmer to represent all the farmers to Washington D.C. You couldn't email there and tell Washington D.C. You had to send somebody, and nobody was a career politician. They did their duty, and then 4 years later they sent somebody else. And nowadays, it's just somebody who's completely removed, who there aren't these pockets of kind of similar people doing similar things, having similar ideas of how they should be managed. So when I look at something like what they call liquid democracy, where you kind of do voting in the blockchain, where you can kind of say okay, maybe I want Neil deGrasse Tyson to represent, votes that are to do with science and not, and somebody else to have votes that have to do with economic policies, and kind of delegate my wishes. And so, because I can't be an expert on everything. I can't know about climate change, and I can't know about economic policies, and I can't know about all these things. I can kind of delegate certain votes to different people. And I think there's a huge impact there waiting to happen. But these things move slowly.
Yeah. It's good to hear that there's not just one person to vote on all these things, because the main issue with sort of that, the popular vote is a lot of people, you hear that a lot of talk, especially with the last election, is this popular vote. But if you look at it, you're like, okay, well, let's say that 3 million votes, right? That 3 million votes could easily be represented by, LA, which is, traditionally swings one way. So what you have is you kind of remove the power from these city centers, meaning okay, well, if it was a popular vote, you would see everyone just campaign where all the people are, because that's the, the biggest impact on your, you could change a lot of minds easily. So that's what, one of the reasons a popular vote to me wouldn't be the right way to go, because then you just have the city centers deciding basically everything.
Right.
You're just okay, well, I'm just going to campaign solely in this place, because, there's 8 million people there. So I'm going to spend, an enormous amount of time making sure that, all these people think the way I do. And, traditionally, urban areas tend to, vote one way versus the other. So, but what you were talking about, what was it? Liquid democracy? That seems like a delegation of your vote to who you believe can represent it the best, as opposed to saying, well, I'm going to vote for this guy because he's least worse,
Right.
Which is what I had a problem with. It's well, he's not as bad, or she's not as bad. I was like, oh my God, that just seems like such a dangerous thing to me in general, which could be, I'm hopeful, optimistic and idealistic that it can be solved with some simple technologies like this. It'll be hard to, dismount the powers that be, but I think it can be done.
Yeah, I try to stay away a lot from politics on the show, but I kind of like to talk about, the big picture of politics. Is there, a way we can really improve the system, for everybody's benefit? Well,
Stephen, you just have to simply drain the swamp.
Right.
It's simple.
It's sad that I
all caps.
Yeah. I think that there's solutions that the blockchain can bring. Will it be slow? Yeah. Are we anywhere near it? No. But I mean, we're in really bad shape when the country was first founded, there was like one representative for every like 20,000 people, every 40,000 people. I mean, the number of representatives hasn't gone up since the founding of our country, but the number of people has gone up. So now there's one representative for every like 400,000 or 600,000, somewhere around there. So the amount of influence your vote has for these people is virtually nothing compared to it was something before. Now it's just the corporations that kind of are the only favor that is swayed by most politicians. Not all, but most.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of people. It's like it's not simple. It's so complicated that there's no possible way that you can represent your constituency when it's that large. There's no there's no way to actually get what the consensus from that like that large of a pool of opinions. One way would be to, leverage some kind of blockchain technology that is unchangeable and use that to go represent. Like you're supposed to be representative, like you have your own vote, but you're largely supposed to represent someone, not just basically carry out your party preferences, which is what it's turned into. I mean, we could talk about politics all day, but I think that's a different podcast.
Yeah, you're looking at doing some sort of voting internally at Wouldwork, where you're doing that for new team members. Do you call it team members, or what's the term?
Just members. I mean,
members?
we don't. Yeah, it's just a member. People that we partner with. We don't get too stuck on that stuff.
Right.
We try to stay away from certain language more than we try to use certain language.
Okay, so your employees.
Yeah, definitely not employees.
Right.
Because that it is distributed enough, which is and I don't control like the payment. It actually is transferred from the person paying for the work to the person doing the work, and that's the core idea and why we want to leverage some kind of representation of that value and transfer it directly and try to get out of the way, right? Like initially there has to be some kind of, someone there to control it just so that we can figure out how to automate it, the right way to automate it.
Yeah, what are some of the thoughts going on right now about how you can use the blockchain to automate your internal voting type consensus?
The voting part is sort of secondary to the transfer of the value that you provide to it. So a big part is so how do we distribute equity of Wouldwork itself? So given that there is no employees, that is actually we're starting with, say it started with me 100%. How do we distribute the value or the equity of Wouldwork throughout the network in a fair and accurate way for the contribution? So it becomes pretty complicated when you start to think about it like that. It's these other companies out there, they the funny thing about it is the equity is the most inequitable thing at the company, right? Where you have these huge, enormous swaths of equity going to a very small amount of people. And then you have the common stock being distributed in tiny amounts to, all of the people that are doing very important work. So trying to figure out how we, as we add new members, how to what's the right, pace of dilution for those who have been in it for a long time versus we don't want someone that just was early on just because they were early to have just a ton of equity and that doesn't diminish. And then all of a sudden someone new come about, maybe even years later and work their ass off, but can never reach that amount. Right. So, but also how do you make sure that you don't you take away from someone that is deserving because of their impact early on? Yeah. So I don't necessarily think it's something where you get in a spreadsheet with a couple of people and figure that out. I think that's one of the things that you sort of you kind of put a more of a simple rule in place, and then make sure that rule stays in place. It's with the same idea of the SegWit stuff. You come up against these sort of Y's in the road, fork in the road, and for lack of a better term, and you try to kind of navigate when you get to it, I suppose. I mean, I don't think there's any other way.
Are you following SegWit at all, or no?
I am, and I'd like to hear your opinion. I heard a little bit. Mine is, I don't know. I'm sort of like I like the original, like the idea that the blockchain is immutable is like, and now all of a sudden we're like, okay, but except for here, here, and here. Yeah. Right. So that's the first and strongest argument is like, well, if it didn't work, then it didn't work. Right. Like it's people trying to, I don't know, it's trying to hold it up. And it's like, well, you can put Band-Aids on it, but if there's a fundamental flaw, then that might be an indicator that it shouldn't exist.
What are you talking about, SegWit itself, or
yeah, I'm talking about, well, just in general of like the idea of like, doing the fork. It happened with Ethereum too, right? You have like these decisions by groups of people that are saying like, oh, well, we're going to change it. It's like, well, isn't the idea of it that you're not supposed to change it? So that's the sort of idealistic part of me speaking is like, staying true. And I get that, changing for SegWit, for example, like changing it to 4 megabytes, right? Like, isn't that just kind of like prolonging the inevitable? Or like pushing it out?
Which is what? If you were to change it to... So I guess there's, a few issues. There's whether you want to do SegWit, which has some benefits and also some things that maybe not be designed the best. And then you have, the block size itself, which was input by Satoshi many, many years ago with the express purposes of like making sure nobody could create a poisonous block. So a block so big that the network couldn't handle it. It was never to limit the amount of spam transactions within a block because spam was limited by the fee. So you couldn't spam the network without paying a fee that wasn't worth the spamming. So that was already done. It was simply that a miner could create a block so big that the network would choke, and in the early stage it kind of needed to be done. There was always the intent of raising that. I feel as if using SegWit as a method for increasing the block size or increasing the scalability of Bitcoin is a horrible idea, and nobody should put forth that argument. It may be a side benefit of it, and that's fine. But if you want true scaling, you need to look at the block size.
Right.
That should have been raised a long time ago, and I don't really understand why anybody's arguing against it. I haven't really heard a good argument. The only person who's saying to lower the block size is Luke Dash Jr. That's a great name. His last name is actually Dash Jr.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I thought maybe his last name was too long, and you were just saying Dash something.
No, and that's like his all his forum names or whatever is like a Dash and Junior, Luke Dash Jr., and his last name is Dash Jr. So that's kind of funny.
That is funny.
But he's the only one that's saying that you should lower the block size. So the current 1 megabyte block size is so unlikely to be correct that it either should be larger or it should be smaller. And nobody is arguing for it to be smaller except for the one person. So I think it should be larger than 1 megabyte. What that is, I don't really know. You can.
Yeah, I was going to say. So how do you figure that out then? Right? Do you write some kind of like algorithm that it scales with the transactions, or because that can't be just something you're like, oh, okay, well everything else is super smart, but we're just going to move it from 2 to 3.
Right.
Like there seems to be like this, just like you're like I said, you're kind of like moving the inevitable just a little further out. You're like, oh, we'll make it 4, and then it's like, okay, well now we hit that. Let's have that conversation again.
Yeah.
And theoretically, you'd be having that conversation more and more often. So I don't know. That one's interesting. I'm kind of interested in the Lightning
network
chain.
Yeah,
the Lightning network where they're advocating for this, but they have so much to gain from it. Like this certain group, all of a sudden now it becomes like political as opposed to ideological. Like they have so much to gain from kind of on the Lightning network. I don't know. Have you read anything about this?
So I've read a bit about it, and I do think Lightning Network is great. I do see that there may be a conflict of interest between the people that are in the core development team that want to keep that block size small because that increases the value of the Lightning Network. I don't have any proof that that's what they're doing, or I don't have any hard evidence that that's the case. But there does seem to be, on a surface level, of a conflict of interest there. Is that kind of what you were mentioning? Maybe that they're
exactly.
Yeah.
They have so much. They're advocates for it, but it's they're clearly going to benefit from it, right? So it's okay, well, that's now all of a sudden that kind of poisons your argument. Have you heard anything about a DAG? An IOTA? IOTA?
Yeah, IOTA, I know a bit about. DAG, I only know DAGs from the memory that certain blockchains have to have. So in order to kind of make sure that you're using a graphics card that has a certain amount of memory, so let's say 2 megabytes of memory in your graphics card, 2 gigabytes or whatever it is, you have to have this DAG file. And I forget what it stands for, but in memory.
Directed acrylic graphic.
Okay. So, and if you don't have that in memory, then you can't mine the block. So that kind of prevents these ASICs from being developed. So that's I don't think Bitcoin uses one of those though.
The way I understand it is instead of a blockchain, verifying every transaction that's existed in it, it's sort of a new transaction comes in and is verified, it has to verify 2 transactions, right? So it's kind of looks like an elongated net, as opposed to. Are we talking about the same thing?
There may be different uses of the DAG file, but You're talking about IOTA specifically, and they use the DAG file to do, what do they call it? I'm trying to remember. It's what's the word that they use? Not spindles. They have a specific
tangle.
Tangles.
It's called a tangles.
Okay,
yes.
Is that got to do with the DAGs? The tangles are part of the DAG? Okay, tell us about it.
Yeah. So I read that there's a white paper in there that I encourage all the listeners that are super interested in the blockchain.
Yeah.
These tangles. So this is another idea. The idea is that it doesn't verify. A new transaction only has to verify 2 other transactions. So there's a super interesting white paper, the IOTA. They wrote about it, and it's a really good. There's some graphics you can look at that explain it pretty well. I mean, there's also some long formulas that I didn't understand, but they were talking about a tangle as opposed to sort of the traditional blockchain and how it's better. I don't know enough about it, but I thought it'd be interesting to kind of bring up so people can go check that out.
Yeah, no, I mean, IOTA is, I think, the first, what they call a blockless blockchain.
Yeah, exactly. That's the tangle is there's no block. It's just the 2 verifying 2 other transactions.
Yeah, and I think it just went live on Bitfinex. So before you could only purchase IOTAs through a decentralized exchange but now you can buy it on Bitfinex. Gaining a lot of popularity lately. People are looking to see what else is out there, see what else might be the next big thing, and IOTA is one of them. I think Sia Coin is another one that people are talking about. It's kind of like a competitor to storage. I don't know why there's so much hype for it, but maybe people felt that they missed out on storage or storage.
Good luck.
And but I really like what IOTA is doing. I don't know. It's at these early stages. It's so hard to tell whether this is going to be whether this is truly revolutionary, or if it's just kind of another another experiment that people will learn from and build upon. And I can't tell at this point. Well, what are your thoughts? You think IOTA is going to be like the number 1 by market cap blockchainless blockchain, or?
Well, taking a step back, I think so. We've done a lot of work, like a considerable amount of work in the IoT space, and so like kind of knowing how it works now, you can see like there's a lot of it's still very nascent, and there's a lot of sort of like issues where you have it sort of feels like the browser wars right now, right? Where like you have all these platforms that are kind of like looking to integrate more physical products into their platform so that all the users go and use their platform to control their sort of their house. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. What I think is interesting about IOTA, and I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but they're kind of like they're using this kind of microtransactions to sort of like, you know, to control the communication. If I'm understanding it, I mean, it's a pretty complicated concept, the way their vision for it. Mm-hmm. But it's much more interesting than sort of like this centralized sort of like one platform you have to communicate to and through. So as far as like the company and the way they're talking about like implementing, you know, the Internet of Things and the transactions and actually like these micro transactions is super, super interesting to me. Especially because like also like the security stuff that comes along with it. I think there's when we start to connect all these physical devices, we're going to see that there's some very specific, you know, vectors for attack that can happen and have like serious impact to, you know, as opposed to just like a, you know, Facebook going down. We're talking about, you know, people's
pacemakers and
you name it. I mean, people are connecting more things to the internet faster than they're being secured. I'll put it like that.
It's impossible to secure right now. It's just it's incredibly insecure, and there needs to be. I think, you know, blockchain will be the solution. IoT plus blockchain, it's a necessity. I
think that's why it's so interesting to me the way they're doing it. And also the implementation you had. Karsten, was that his name? Karsten on the show?
Karsten Stucker. It's German. I can't. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but it's close enough. Karsten Stucker.
Yeah. So some of the stuff I recommend that anyone listening to this show go back and listen to that one. I found that one just super fascinating. The idea of you know, having these machines or these physical devices actually, you know, have their own, you know, bank or whatever. They hold their own coin, right? And they trade it to repair themselves, and they manufacture on their own. Obviously AI is like a super interesting topic for us, given that like we're a network of people and we do work, and like how does, you know, that impact us? What does the future of work look like? And obviously through these like, you know, these autonomous sort of like manufacturing facilities or whatever, you know, whether that's a tiny, you know, 3D printer sitting on your desk or, you know, something larger. But obviously, you know, like you have, you know, IoT components there, and it goes on and on. Someone in the networks mentioned something super interesting. We were talking about that podcast specifically, that episode. Yeah. And he was like, I think it's really interesting when they start to, you know, accrue debt. So these independent machines, like not only do they have their own, you know, the trading ability, you know, saying like, oh, I need to, you know, I'm a car, I've been driving around and I've been making all this money and I have good margins, and now all of a sudden I need to go buy some new tires because they're, you know, low. But then all of a sudden, like, when does this car take out debt? Yeah. Or take on debt? and then it gets super interesting.
That's going to be one of those weird things, because with with a depreciating asset like the dollar, you can kind of see like, you know, okay, we'll just charge interest and the asset will go down in value that you're giving out, but then, you know, what they pay back, we'll just charge interest on that. But with like a appreciating asset, like how do you handle debt?
I don't have the answer to that. It gets so complicated.
Yeah. But, you know, you can see like a car like going, oh, I'm just going to, you know, make installment payments on my tires that I need to repair. And I can see something. Yeah, it's you know, Karsten was talking about the Maslow's hierarchy of needs for machines, which is like it's like a concept that I didn't even think was like, first the machine has to have, you know, power, energy. And then it needs to have money. I'm like, what? The machine has a need for money. And it makes sense. I mean, you can see these Internet of Things devices that, they're going to get their power first, and once they have the power, then they're going to get money, and now they need debt, and And
if they have money, they have the ability to take on debt, right? Yeah. And it might be a more lucrative for the, if theoretically you have a bunch of people or n amount of people that have ownership over this money making device, whatever you want to call it. Distributed, and then all of a sudden it becomes a better, it becomes more, financially responsible for it to take on debt than to go to, at that time,
right,
than it would be to go do anything else. It's like what the, banks used to be, entities that held money and like loaned it for money, and now they're just, they're not that anymore at all. They're investment vehicles, and they just mess around with financials all day, so, as opposed to operating like real banks.
Is that kind of your wheelhouse? This talent you have at Wouldwork, kind of Internet of Things type devices.
Yeah, so we have a lot of experience in Internet of Things. We just actually launched a product that for another company. Well, they're in their alpha, but it is an enterprise implementation of IoT. So instead of thinking about it like, oh, you can control the lights in your house, think about it if I was a property manager and I have multiple properties of 300, 400 units, let's say plus, this company, we built a platform that controls all of the units from one control center. So and this includes access management, which is why we're talking about security constantly.
Yeah.
Not only where to host the platform, but also life hacking these things, right? Turns out that we figured out that, having a lock controlled by Internet of Things is much safer than keys because of oh yeah, I mean, think about a key.
Yeah.
You can nowadays you can take a picture of a key and literally send that picture to Home Depot, and they'll send you the key.
Wow.
Yeah, keys can be lost, stolen, remade.
Yeah.
All you got to know is they're sitting around. If you look at some of these the property management companies, they spend tens of thousands of dollars on these key management systems, where you have to type in a code to take out the key. But once it leaves that box, you don't know what happens. There's no record. There's no log of that, right? There's no log of the entry and exit to the apartment, who did it, when they did it. So we've covered all of that, right? There's logs for, access management, who did it, because there is no more keys. So you either have to type in a code on the door, or anyone in the staff doesn't have a code. They have to literally use the app that we built that connects to the platform, and they have to log into their account, and it shows a record of who entered. So anyway, the key management systems, a lot of the times the doors are just left open because it's a pain in the ass to open and close this door all the time. They don't know what key you took. It's just basically a lockbox with a record. So, but yeah, so this.
I bet you could tie that in with the fire department and stuff too. So now they have
exactly,
easy access to any of these buildings.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Or you could just, if there's a huge fire, you could just make sure that the door is just unlocked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How
do you deal with downtime? If the internet's down for some odd reason, how does?
Well, there's a keypads on all the doors.
Oh, okay.
So the codes are actually loaded into the firmware on the lock. And so an important part of that is obviously the battery management, which is something that we, approached very carefully, so that we're monitoring and pinging each door all the time. There's notifications making sure that, the batteries need to be changed at a certain time. So, and obviously there is always a physical, there's a physical way to get into that lock, but you can actually lock that key away, and literally only one person or they're all locked, and there's limited access to that.
Is it only locks you've got set up now, or do you have
No, so it's literally anything in the apartment. So the platform was built for access management specifically, but there's a hub in each unit. So now you can literally connect anything you want to that hub. So the idea of the platform is basically to optimize these property management companies. So when you think about above access management, now you can control and monitor your entire staff, making sure that like your staff is efficient, how much time they're spending on fixing something in an apartment, which is like analytics on how your staff is performing just on the property.
Yeah.
But then furthermore, you have energy management, you have water management, which is quickly becoming the most expensive utility in America. So a lot of people didn't know that either. So energy is sort of like an always leaking thing, right? Like you have a light on or you have something plugged in, but water is not and should not be, right? So like if you're monitoring the water that's coming into a specific unit, when no one's using it, there should be zero water moving through the pipe. So as soon as you monitor, a certain amount of water moving through the pipe, or movement just in general, then you can predict with certainty that there's a leak.
Yeah.
A lot of these properties, larger properties, actually they pay for the water, so they just push it. They put it into the rent. But a lot of the times, the people that if the water's included, you're not very conscious of how much water you use.
Right.
So instead of kind of coming in and putting in the low flow, you could actually just notify them of their water usage, or you could say, hey, like it's, you could actually push on the cost of how much you use to that person, or just make sure that there's limits or something like that. So there's the potential of, once you have internet connectivity to all the devices inside of these units, the savings that you could push onto the tenant are pretty amazing as far as energy and water consumption and all that stuff, and just actually just making their lives a little bit better.
What's the blockchain use? Is it security, or is there other blockchain use?
So right now we don't have one on that, but that's again, like, it's sort of like, people right now are like, talking about it. Like a lot of people I've talked to about blockchain are like, yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
And that's about it, and then there's another group that are like super interested in it. And then there's this super tiny group that are like, yeah, we're actually building on it. And then an even smaller group that says like, oh, we already have this great product, functioning on it. So
not many of those.
Right. So like, as far as like trying to get these guys on the blockchain and show the value in it, they're like, well, we'd like to have the company first, let's get some properties on it. And then we can talk about how to, start to integrate it with the blockchain or something like IOTA.
Right.
So, but the thing is like, as we kind of build and work with all these companies, we find that like there's literally a use for blockchain in every single one of them, and it would make it exponentially better, which is why it's so exciting and why we're working on it internally ourselves. So just so that we can make sure that, when it's time to implement it, we know exactly what we're doing. And so, we want anyone that's listening to be able to come over and join us if they have something they want to build, or they just, they want to be working on the blockchain, or they already work on blockchain technology and struggle to find someone to work with on it.
And how do they find you? What's your website? I went to your website. It looks like it's a coming soon page, or
yeah. So by the time this airs, we will have launched the new site. It's Wouldwork.com. So that's WOULD work.com. We will have all the projects that were listed, that we're working on, and some of the ones in flight, and some of the stuff we want to work on will be available there. And you can literally just click the button that says I want to partner with this, or I want to work on this. So the whole idea is that you could find interest with us, and then you could show intent, and then we'll go from there. So we like, because we base everything on the relationship, we want to make sure that it's not just like this automated thing. We will reach out to you, and we will have many conversations to see if there is potentially something to do together.
Awesome.
Oh, I have a request.
Okay.
Bring back the bits.
Oh, you like the bits?
I love the bits.
Yeah,
love the bits.
The bits is one of those awesome things that just takes a ton of. I'll bring it. It's a lot of work, and And then it's like, I don't know if people liked it or didn't like it, or
it was like I thought I did enough reading about the blockchain to stay current, and then I'd listen to you guys and I'd be like, I did not hear about that. So
yeah,
maybe you try to collectively pull information together, but rely on the community and the listeners to get you do all that research for the bits.
Yeah. Huh. Maybe is there? You had mentioned possibly helping us out with something. Or?
Yeah, so we have the network has a bunch of people that are super excited about the blockchain, and also they just absolutely love the show.
No way.
So as soon as I turned them on to it, they're like, "This is awesome." I'm sure there's a bunch of people that would love to keep talking. One of the guys, no offense, but he was like, we should redo their website.
Yeah, it's like 15 minutes of WordPress. That's, I built it, and I don't have a ton of time, and it's just WordPress and whipped it together, and it works, but it sucks. I mean, it's a piece of shit.
Well, why don't I, now that I have you on record, and if this is in the podcast, why don't you let Wouldwork redo it? And we'll just do it out of because we love the show.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so it's our contribution then.
No way.
Yeah, for sure. Done. Have you heard about this? We might be going over a little bit, and we can cut off whenever.
Yeah, should I just stop recording? Or no?
Yeah, go ahead.
The Blockchain Show is a team effort by Steve Anderson, Heather Sullivan, Ethan Kinniconnect, and Sarah Hempling. To learn more, visit theblockchainshow.com.